Hello, Milwaukee Bucks fans. Welcome back to another episode of Bucks Latest presented by Fan Arch. As always, I'm your host, Dean Simon. And before we get into everything today, please make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, and also subscribe. We are still very much on the road to 1,000 subscribers. I don't know how we're reaching that milestone so quick. So thank you to everybody that's already pressed that big red button down below. I really appreciate it. Also, turn on post notifications so you don't miss future episodes and you stay in the know with all the latest Milwaukee Bucks updates. All right, so first thing that I've seen a couple of different places in terms of Bucks media and different Bucks writers for certain websites is that coming off of Eurobasket, of course, where Greece finished with the bronze and Giannis brought home a medal for Greece while wearing it across his chest, which is fantastic for him and Thanasis as well. It's just awesome. Germany, of course, ended up going on to win Eurobasket, win the gold over Turkey, who was the one that took down Greece in the process. But Germany came away with it. Dennis Schroeder won, I believe, tournament MVP. But the player of the game, or the player that received the player of the game recognition for that gold medal game against Turkey, was the unassuming forward Isak Bonga, who could eventually be pursued not just by the Milwaukee Bucks, but by a myriad of different NBA teams looking to add a pretty skilled wing that, it would also complete a pretty great story for Isak Bonga, though he left the NBA in pretty dire circumstances, and he was there for about 3 or 4 years, and he never really stuck. He was there for the Wizards with a couple of years, and it just didn't really pan out at all. It could have been viewed as like a Cameron Payne situation where Cam Payne was once viewed as maybe the worst player in the NBA for a certain stretch of time when he was with the Bulls, but then he just managed to kind of revive his career, and he ended up becoming at a point one of the best backup point guards in the league. So Isak Bonga could be a guy that he struggled in the NBA at first, but then he went overseas for a little while and kind of built himself back up and got himself to a point where he could come back into the NBA. But in terms of his stock for the rest of this offseason, he already committed to playing overseas again for this year, so it's looking like 2026 free agency is probably going to be the best bet to see Isak Bonga land on an NBA team once again. But the Milwaukee Bucks should definitely keep an eye on him again, as well as plenty of other teams, because he had 20 points for Germany in the 2025 Eurobasket gold medal game, and he shot 4 of 4 from three, and he ended up winning that player of the game award again, just based on his work from a 3 and D perspective. And you could tell that he really became very polished in terms of his footwork and his decision making, and he looked fantastic out there. And he could join a guy like Gershon Yabusele, let's say, who he was kind of the talk of the summer of 2024 and going into the 24-25 season, where he had a great run with France in the Olympics, got all the way to the gold medal game, of course, dunked on LeBron with that very famous moment in the gold medal game, and then boosted his stock enough to where he got a contract with the 76ers, and he had a fantastic return season to the NBA after being gone for a good number of years. And then eventually he landed on the Knicks this past summer on a 2-year deal. So Isak Bonga could definitely be a guy that fills those kinds of shoes, or kind of takes that same route in terms of a guy like Yabusele. So the Bucks could certainly be in the market for a guy like that again, coming to next season, where it's probably going to be a very unpredictable 2026 season for the Bucks. Just going to be a lot of decisions to make and maybe a good amount of roster turnover, even though you did bring a couple of key guys back on multi-year deals. So he could definitely be a target. Excuse me. But I wanted to talk about Malcolm Brogdon going to the New York Knicks. And of course, this news isn't necessarily new. This was announced a good number of days ago. But Malcolm Brogdon going to the New York Knicks, I feel like you could look at it from a couple of different perspectives. In a way, it's obviously huge for the New York Knicks to get a guy of Malcolm Brogdon's caliber and talent to come off of their bench and maybe only play maybe 12 to 15 minutes a game, because they still do have Deuce McBride and they also Jordan Clarkson. They're one of their new additions from this summer. So there's going to be sort of a toss up in terms of playing time, even though Malcolm Brogdon should definitely get out there on the floor for a great number of minutes. But it's a weird way there's a weird way to look at it too, where there are guys like Deuce McBride who, over this past playoff run for the Knicks, he really, I would think, gained the trust of a lot of people on the Knicks coaching staff and within their organization, that he could be called upon to be a reliable contributor in those instances. And of course, Jordan Clarkson, 2021 Sixth Man of the Year winner, but Malcolm Brogdon is a Sixth Man of the Year winner too. So there could be a little bit of a fight for playing time in that aspect. The only thing for the Knicks is just how much better does Malcolm Brogdon actually make the Knicks when you consider the guys that could be ahead of him in the depth chart or in the rotation. But this also has to do with injury, whether Malcolm Brogdon's going to respond very well to being injured for most of the year and kind of being the subject of buyout talks with the Washington Wizards. And there's going to be a lot of questions regarding Malcolm Brogdon, and the only way to look at this now, because of course Malcolm Brogdon hasn't been a part of the Milwaukee Bucks for a good number of years. The only way to look at this is how much does he really strengthen a team like New York, who's looking to be at the top of the conference again in 2026, and they're of course looking to make a deep playoff run and go to the NBA Finals. So how much better does Malcolm Brogdon actually make the Knicks? Overall, maybe a smidge better because, again, coming off of plenty of nagging injuries and age having to be a factor, and guys like Deuce McBride getting a little bit more of a nudge in the rotation, that really does affect his chances of actually making real contributions for the Knicks. Of course, Malcolm Brogdon is a fantastic option to just be at the end of your bench, like, oh yeah, we have this card up our sleeve. We have Malcolm Brogdon ready to jump in at any moment. And of course, he's a veteran, a very seasoned playoff experienced guy that, of course, helped the Boston Celtics make a deep playoff run, and he just has so much uh, tutelage, I guess, that he could offer some of the younger guys like Deuce McBride for the Knicks. But the the only way to look at it is that the Knicks are maybe the Bucks' biggest competition in this conference, and we're gonna have to see how much he really affects their lineup on a night to night basis, because again, with the age, with the injuries coming into play, it may be very wildly different. There could be plenty of different expectations that fans have and different people in the NBA have for the Knicks, and a lot of it could hinge on whether Malcolm Brogdon is actually getting succinct opportunities, and he could actually contribute to a fantastic New York Knicks team, but it remains to be seen. So moving forward, going to talk about Myles Turner for a minute, and just the fact that it seems as though he is loving Milwaukee so far. He's doing a bunch of different stuff. It almost looks like he's on sort of like a press tour, for as if he's releasing a movie or an album or something, but it's really just him taking in the different things that you could do around the city and just around the general Milwaukee area. He was going to a Green Bay Packers game with AJ Green, taking pictures on social media of all these different restaurants and foods that he's trying, and just, the scenery. And he also said on X, I believe, that he's been spoiled by the weather in Milwaukee. And it kind of answers the age old question of why would any star caliber athlete go to Milwaukee? Why would that be their choice? It seems as though there's a lot to love about Milwaukee, and Miles Turner is certainly the beneficiary of that as well. And credit to Miles Turner, again, coming from the Indiana Pacers, one of their, if not their biggest rival over the past 2 seasons, and all the kind of controversy or the reaction that surrounded that decision to up and leave Indiana for Milwaukee, especially after going to the finals. Um, it seems as though Milwaukee could very much be the right choice in terms of Miles Turner, just as a person loving the city. Um, but when the season rolls around, he's going to actually have to focus on playing and earning victories for this team. Though it's a great start for him to just be so naturally in love with his general surroundings and all the activities that he could do around the city. It just he signed a 4-year deal, so he's going to be here for a good while, and you might as well get off to a good start and have that be by way of him just liking the area that he's going to be staying in for the next handful of years. So last thing we're going to mention here today is that Gary Harris, he was a part of this list that the guys at Brew Hoop for SB Nation have been putting together of a roster ranking for the Milwaukee Bucks. They go from 20 to 1, and the reason why it's 20 is because they include guys from the G League roster and guys that are on training camp contracts that are fighting to make the actual roster. So it's guys like Mark Sears and Tyler Smith and Chris Livingston, Amir Coffey, and Gary Harris actually landed at number 12 on that team ranking. But the thing that I think is the most interesting about that ranking is that it is like, I just mentioned Amir Coffey. It is one spot higher than Amir Coffey, who landed at number 13. And I just think it's really interesting because you could make a great argument that Amir Coffey right now in this current moment is a better player than Gary Harris. And I feel like that's not really something you can argue against, just especially from a box score standpoint and a efficiency standpoint. You can't really argue that. But the way that the guys at Brew Hoop might be thinking about this is maybe in a playoff setting or some type of big time setting. Who would you rather have on the floor? Would you rather have a guy like Amir Coffey that might be able to offer more natural talent, but you could also run the risk of, he hasn't been in certain situations before. He's not the most experienced playoff player. Meanwhile, on the other end, Gary Harris he has a lot more experience. He has a lot more experience just being in super high leverage situations. And he's just a very high IQ guy that knows where to be in the right moments. And for that reason, I could definitely see Gary Harris ranking one spot higher than Amir Coffey, especially because, like I said, Amir Coffey is in a position where he's kind of fighting for an actual guaranteed roster spot on a training camp deal. But you would expect for the Bucks to have went out and got him in free agency from the LA Clippers that, he would ultimately receive a guaranteed spot, but still remains to be seen because guys like him and now Cormac Ryan are both going to be kind of fighting together. Though Amir Coffey I feel like it's without a shadow of a doubt that he's going to make this roster. He's going to be handed a guaranteed spot. But at the moment, it looks as though Gary Harris has the slight edge over Amir Coffey. And, I can't help but stress that from a natural talent standpoint in 2025, if this were 2017, 2018, when Gary Harris was kind of at the peak of his powers for the Denver Nuggets, then we would be having a completely different conversation because he was one of the most underrated players of that time. And he was getting up to heights of maybe 17, 18 points a game for the Nuggets. He was really a great player for Denver. But in this current day, he's kind of been reserved to more of a veteran leadership type role and a guy that plays spot minutes for good teams. So it does make sense though, again, because of that experience factor, because of his smarts, that Gary Harris would rank over Amir Coffey in this kind of list. But anyways, that'll be it for me today. Thank you very much for tuning into another episode of Bucks Latest presented by Fan Arch. Again, I've been Dean Simon, and make sure to leave a like, leave a comment down below, and press that subscribe button. Still very much on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and turn on post notifications so you stay up to date with all of the latest Milwaukee Bucks updates. All right, I will see you guys in the next one. Go Bucks.